Hello and welcome to this micrographics webinar. Thank you for joining us. We will begin shortly and we're just waiting for a few more people to join, so just hang in there and we will start the webinar. Alright, let's begin. Today's topic is going to be Autodesk Inventor 2023, what's new in 2023. My name is Irshad Hanif, I'm an application engineer with micrographics, and once again thank you for joining us. The purpose for today's webinar: we're going to take a quick tour of new features and changes in Inventor 2023. We're always excited when a new version of Inventor comes out, and now we're going to take a sort of in-depth look at what exactly has been changed, as it can be hard to see without knowing any of the info from Autodesk themselves. Let's take a look at our agenda for today. We're going to have a small introduction. Then we're going to look at general enhancements. Then we're going to take a look at interoperability, that is between things like Revit and Fusion. We're going to take a look at the changes to the part modeling environment as well as the assembly modeling environment. We're going to discuss very briefly the performance changes and what changes they've made to documentation, which is basically your drawings and presentation files. Firstly, about me, my name is Irshad Hanif. I'm an application engineer with micrographics. I have about 8 years plus experience, primarily in the mechanical engineering field, but I've since been working in the Autodesk channel. My primary areas of expertise are AutoCAD, Inventor, as well as Fusion 360. But I do have a wide range of skills that extend as far as CAM, FEA, which is finite element analysis, design and modeling, as well as product data management, which would be your things like Autodesk Vault, and more recently Upchain. I'm an Autodesk certified professional, which means I've taken my Autodesk exams and got my certification as a certified professional. So that's enough about me. Let's get on with the topic. So, Inventor 2023 has been out for a while now. The minimum system requirements have seen not much changes, or any, I believe, from the 2022 release, so it is posted up there on the right. I've just taken the minimum system requirements of importance, which is mainly your hardware. So if you need to check whether your PC can handle 2023, well, if it could handle 2022, then you should be good. As we state, as always with Inventor, larger assemblies can be quite intensive to compute and pull things in and out of the memory, so a larger amount of RAM is required. So for large assemblies we would recommend 32 gigabytes of RAM, but 16 will do just fine for less than 500 part assemblies. Okay, you would still need a minimum 1 gigabyte GPU with 29 gigabit per second of bandwidth, and it has to be DirectX 11 compliant, which has been the case for a while now. Okay, the latest update as of this webinar is 2023.0.1, and that should fix a few things you can find either on your Autodesk account or even just Autodesk site, a change log of what was changed in that particular update. Right, so you'll find that in Inventor 2023 a lot of the improvements have been taken from user feedback. So that is mainly the Idea Station and Autodesk forums. So if you are not currently active in those spaces or those platforms, please go ahead, as you can see that Autodesk do indeed listen, and they do take your queries and your feedback and your ideas. So let's take a look at the general enhancements. Firstly, you'll find that Inventor 2023 has a brand new Home tab. So when you start up the software, at the Home tab it used to be very segmented with big icons on the left and right, and you had a big space for your project selection. Um, that is now gone, and they've sort of streamlined it to give you this more cleaner look that you can find a snapshot on the right. Right. This allows more focus on the recently open drawings, and as you can see, you can view them in either thumbnail or list view. And it's just a small section on the left panel dedicated to your project switcher, as well as the open and new. Things to note is that you have open with options. So this will allow you to open directly a brand new model with a specific model state. Now this will save time with large data sets, because you don't want to have to open the model and then go to your representations or your model states and then change it, especially if it's like many hundreds of parts. You'd probably want to open it with a particular model state from the start. Right. Another interesting option is that they have added the option to disable the Home tab, and that can be done from the application options menu. So let's take a look at that brief set of settings. I will show you my Inventor on the screen, and let's hope we can take a look at that. There we go. Here's my Inventor. If you look at the Home tab, it is completely different. Right? The project switcher has now been reduced to a drop-down list with a 3-dot menu to get to the full dialog box, which we can add and browse for additional project files we may want to add to this list. Right. Our open dialog box has been simplified to one button, and as stated, when we click on a particular design that we would like to open, we'll have this options menu down here. This will allow us to select the model in a particular model state from the beginning. So if we had multiple model states in this design, we'd select it and load that from the start. As you can see, the new part opening dialog or drop down list has just been simplified right below the open button, and it gives you your basic, but there is an option here right up in the bottom to browse the templates, which will take us to the familiar menu that we get when we click the new up top in the quick access area. So everything is familiar but slightly different. Alright. There is also an improved navigation system. So we are familiar, or we should all be familiar, with the shortcut to navigate if you use the shift and the middle mouse button. So it works with 3-button mouse or 3-button mice, of course, which are basically all mice these days. Of course, we know that the shortcut to orbit is to hold shift and the middle click button. However, they've slightly refined exactly how that works to allow you to more easily and more granularly rotate the model in particular situations. Right? Those 3 particular situations are: 1, when the model is in full view; 2, when the model is partially in view; and 3, when the model is outside the view. Right? I've took the liberty of putting little pictures of what those 3 things mean. So the first picture on the left, full model in view. Second picture will be model partially in view, and the last picture when the model is out of view. So the question is, how will it handle each of these cases? Well, when the model is in full view, so the first type, the pivot point is the model geometric center. So it'll find the geometric center of that 3D shape and rotate about that point. You'll even see a little green dot showing you where it's pivoting. Right? That is the UI ease of understanding. You get that little green pivot icon. We'll take a look at it just now. The second type is when the model is partially in view, like the center picture. right? What will happen there is that the pivot point will snap to the nearest edge, face, or vertex of the nearest component. So, for example, if I have this particular component in view, the entire design is partially in view, but this particular component, so the nearest face, vertex, or edge um, will become the pivot point instead of the geometric center. And lastly, when we have the model outside of view, so in this case, in this model, the model is to the left or to the right, you will find that when I use my rotate, shift and middle click, it will simply pivot the point around the cursor. So wherever the cursor is, that's where it will pivot. So let's take a look at how that works very briefly so we can carry on. Like I said, we have our model, and as stated, we can use our shortcut to orbit, and we see there that our pivot point is the geometric center. Right? So we can find that the geometric centers can sometimes change, but here it is now, my geometric center. You can see the icon there. When the model is partially in view, we can go like this, and we can see that it rotates about a specific edge. So let's go like this, maybe here. So the nearest edge or point will become, right? So you can see here the nearest point or edge is now changed. And lastly, when it is completely out of focus or not in the view, you'll find that the model is outside the view. You can rotate and it will pivot around wherever my cursor was, as shown. Next up, iLogic enhancements. So we can now add external rules and global forms to the ribbon. So you'll find that you have your options in parameters, and you can add these external rules and global forms directly to the ribbon from your inventor. You can also have multi-value parameters in a particular order. So for example, when you add a multi-value list in your parameters area, you can change the order by simply going to this additional menu. So here's our parameters list. If I add a numeric or a multi-value, we'll go test, right? We'll put the unit in whatever, and we can go right. So in this menu you will have the multi-value option. Right. Simply right click on the user or on the parameter that you created, and you can say make multi-value, right? And you will get this dialog box here as shown in my slides. So you can add new items, you can add one, right? You can add 5, and you can add, so each one of these will become a value. So these are the values, and you can move them up and down as stated. So let's just clear all of them. So you can also add allow custom values and so on and so forth. So for example, if I want to add, let's say 15 or 12 or whatever it is, I can add it to the list, and I can move it up and down depending on where I want the order to be. And you can see how the order has now been changed. Next up is general enhancements to the graphics. We now have improved lighting and visuals, and the option to allow GPU ray tracing. So previously ray tracing was allowed, but it was CPU based. Now CPU based can be very inefficient to do ray tracing, and as we all know now, most modern GPUs control some sort of custom bits in their chips to allow for GPU ray tracing capabilities. So in particular, things like NVIDIA's RTX series, you'll find that now Inventor is able to support ray tracing on those kind of GPUs. Right? This allows for potentially high performance and higher quality, since it's using a dedicated silicon for ray tracing. Now let's look at interoperability. Right? Revit to Inventor data exchange. With data exchanges, you can view and filter data. You can consume and make changes to the data, as well as get notifications and understand different versions. So you can visualize those changes straight from your sheets and views area in Inventor. So this allows Revit stuff to be uploaded directly to the cloud, and then from there to Inventor. So that data exchange makes life very easy using the upgraded Revit to Inventor interoperability settings. Similarly, we now have a panel for Fusion 360, so Inventor to Fusion 360. You could be modeling a very complex design, and you'll find a new tab in Inventor called Fusion 360, and they've separated that tab with different panels, so you can go directly to make the most of the options that are available on Fusion 360, and that is in particular those panels: generative design, simulation, manufacture, and basic modeling or under design. So you'll find, for example, here is an example of a very basic part. You'll find that I have a Fusion 360 tab, and I can take this directly to a specific environment in Fusion 360. For example, if I click to take it into the modeling workspace, I can say yes, I can refine, render or animate or output 3D printing from here, and it will directly link up to my account and find all the teams and projects that I have in that particular team. Right, so currently I belong to these kind of teams. If I go in here and I say I want to go to that particular team, it would go online and search for my projects in there and allow me to save it directly in there without having to export and import all the time. Right? I also have the option to launch Fusion 360 as soon as I am done with this upload, and it will automatically do it for me. So I can go in here and say let's upload this part here. So when it's done, it will give you this little message, and you can view it directly on the A360, or you can just simply open Fusion 360 when you're ready to work with this part. You can also interact with canvas data, so you can experience improved image fidelity when opening Fusion 360 electrical designs that have canvas data. So how that's going to work is when you import a sort of PCB design from Fusion 360, you will simply select the meshes option, right, under the object filters. So that will basically allow improved image fidelity when opening Fusion 360 electrical designs. Right. There's also more data exchange options. They've adjusted certain formats and improved and added new formats that were not there before. So if you take a summary of them, um, GITF is an open source format that stores the model, scene, and animation data. So mainly from the creative side, you'll find that the default output for that kind of format is GLB. It's fully self-constrained binary file, and both export file types are supported by the task scheduler. Right. You also have GLB that produces a single binary file, so with all of the textures included, typically used by one who is consuming the output. We also have JT import and export availability now. So we have support for version 10.6 and 10.7, and it includes read and write support for UCS. Okay. There's been some improvements to the performance of opening step files, right? And also added support for UCS support, so Universal Coordinate System. The STL export, the default unit for XTL export, are now in millimeters. And lastly, we have the USDZ export. USDZ is basically a format that is newly added in this Inventor 2023. USDZ packages are commonly used for augmented reality applications. So the export uses ASCII for file naming, not Unicode. Just a little note there. Now let's take a look at part modeling enhancements. Okay, first up in the part modeling environment, we have a new marking tool. Right? We can create markings using text or geometry that you have drawn in a sketch. Right? This can be used for laser marking, etching, engraving, and also export that to DXF and DWG with style controls available. Right? So basically you can use any sketch with a text or a geometry to create a marking. You'll see the mark tool appears under the modify panel in the 3D model tab, and you can define custom mark styles and assign them to selection sets within the mark features. Okay, so basically, again, very simply, a particular part, I can create a sketch on this part, and let us go in here. So I'm just going to create a marking here. Let's create a nice big area here, and in this marking area I'll just type a mark. Let me just adjust the size, and that'll be a marking for our particular part. Once that's done, I can simply go back to my 3D model tab and use my marking tool to get that text engraved. You'll find that it brings up this menu here. I just need to click my selection set. It identifies the geometry or text, and it will mark the surface with some lines. So that will be a marking command listed under the browser tree. Right. Mark features are displayed in 2D and 3D and can be exported within the flat pattern or DXF export. So if this was a sheet metal part, right, you can create a flat pattern, and this will indeed copy through to your DXF when you eventually get there. Next up is the sketching modifications. So there's two sketching, one of which you might have already seen when I typed in that little text, and the other one I haven't showed yet. So the first change to the sketching or enhancement that they've added to the sketching is the projected geometry. There is now a one-click tool that can select all broken geometry. You'll see it on the right in this image here. It says select broken projections. So what is that all about? So basically, when you edit things higher up in the browser tree, and let's say they are no longer in existence or they've since been deleted, and you now have a sketch lower down in the browser tree or in the model tree that is referencing something that is no longer there, it will normally display with this magenta color, and it will say that it's a broken link. So you can right click anywhere in the open space and you can simply say select these broken projections instead of having to select each individual line and do what you need to do to fix those sketches, right? The second addition enhancement there is you now have a way to add iProperties in a normal text entry. So when I entered that text previously for the marking, you would have seen there in the text box I have a drop down for type, and I can select standard iProperties, and I can put in things, for example, like the file name or the designer or perhaps the part or stock code number if those fields are populated. So let's take a look. What? We said we're going to take a look at projected geometry and what exactly or broken projected geometry. So for example, if I have something like this, okay, I should probably convert it back to a standard part for us to show, right? When I extrude, right, now let's say I've made that this extrusion sits here on the model tree, okay, and let's say I wanted to do something like this where I would project that shape uh, in a subsequent uh, or in a subsequent command, so something like that. Or maybe I'll just go in here and I'll say, just to make it easier to see, I'll do a little offset based on that projection. I'll say so it's that yellow line is referencing that outer face at the top here. What? I'll extrude here. Right. So here you go. Here is my sketch. I'll just make it visible for now so we can see what's going on. Now, like we said, if this goes away along with its sketch, right, for whatever reason, it will upset the model. So let's take a look. If I delete that, it'll say, yep, I'm going to delete both the dependent sketches as well. And as predicted, the sketch now appears as a broken projection. Right, so it's projecting an offset of 5 away from some projection that no longer exists. So the new tool is that I can go in when I'm editing the sketch. To fix this, I would have to go and select each of these lines or do something with it. But right now you can simply click anywhere in the blank space and select broken projections. That will highlight everything that's in the magenta color and say, okay, what would you like to do with it? I can simply delete it and get rid of it completely without much hassle. Of course, that passes the problem onto the next drawing, but onto the next set of lines, but that's just in this particular case. Right. The other tool that we have available, I'm just gonna hide that, is the when I'm creating a sketch, right, I can drop down text from my iProperties, right, so let's go here and say 12, and I can choose the sources iProperties and say let's put in the file name, for example. So I'll say, yep, I'm going to put in the file name in here, size 12 at the top here. I'll just drop that in, and you're going to find that, okay, in this case I've already saved the part, which is called INV 2023 part. So just like that, oops, it's upside down. Okay, cool. Just like that, I can input important bits of data from my standard eye properties without having to do much. I can even use this in conjunction with my mark tool and get that in DXF. So very useful for part identification in a manufacturing workflow. Okay, um, now we'll discuss sheet metal enhancements in 2023. Um, Basically, we now have extended information in the browser, so you'll find that uh, if you look at your folded model, you can see a full list of everything that was done to get this folded model. For example, when you start off, you'd have a face, a second face, a flange, an extrusion, another flange, and so on and so forth. You can see all of that in the folded model area. Oops, sorry. Right. You now have the option for asymmetric extrusion for contour flange. Um, you can now replace splines with tangent arcs when you're exporting your to DXF, and you can also derive component templates. So let's take a look at just some of them very quickly, as this is not a substitute for full training, but just to briefly show you what kind of things have been added to Inventor 2023. Okay, so I have a sheet metal part here, and we'll just start by drawing something. Okay, so I'll just make a face first, right? So you'll see it'll record the face as well as, let's say, yep. Okay, so it records every single bend and corner. So in the browser window, you'll see much more details recorded for each and every command. Okay, so I'll just add one more flange as an example. Right, and we can see it records everything in there as well. Next up is asymmetric extrusion for contour flange. I'm just going to get rid of these. I am going to draw a rough sketch of something to use the contour flange command. So something like this. So let's just say and maybe something like that. Let's dimension that 50. Okay, so now I have a sketch that can be used with the contour flange command, right? The new option here is that on the type for the width extents, I have asymmetric to take this into different lengths in different directions. So I can say first length must be, let's say, 200, and the second length must be 60, for example. And that is the asymmetric extrusion for contour flange. Right. Next up is replacing these splines with tangent arcs. So if I create a flat pattern from this, and we know that we can take our flat pattern and save copy as, right, if I do that, okay, you'll find under the geometry tab I now have an option to convert the curves to tangent arcs. So I can say arc approximation and go like that instead of a linear approximation using the straight line edge. Right. Okay, let's get back to it. 3D model features, right? So in the normal 3D modeling space, we have some extra features added to things like fillets and relationships. So let's take a look. The fillet now has tolerance settings. Okay, so if you enter a value for a fillet around a part, around an edge, around an edge, you'll find that now you can specify tolerances for that radius of that fillet. Okay, you can also have relationships for suppressed features, which was never there previously, and you can also extrude and revolve presets. So when you find using the extrude and revolve tool, you have presets that you can choose from, and you also have a visibility shortcut, right? So a visibility toggle shortcut, which is basically Alt V. Perhaps I should have written it down. So it's the Alt key plus V. So let's take a look at some of these features very quickly. Right, basically we're talking about the fillet features. So you'll find that if I wanted to add some, let's say, fillets to there and there and there and there, you'll find that if I click on here, I can now have a tolerance option, which will bring up this menu, and I can apply some tolerances based on a specific type of tolerance, a deviation upper limit and a lower limit, for example, on that particular radius edge. Okay, so you'll find that fillet has tolerances applied to it. So when you're labeling it, you will find it indeed has those tolerances. You now have relationships for suppressed features. So if I go to an assembly and I say, alright, let's say that particular component was suppressed, right, you'll find that I still have the right, I still have the relationships in here. Right. And lastly, very quickly, we can take a look at the visibility shortcut, which is basically a quicker way of hiding or identifying key things like solids, work features, or sketches. So for example, let's take our part. A solid, normally we'd have to go in here, find the solid and right click and say visibility. We can simply just click on it and use Alt plus V to disable its visibility. Similarly, on a sketch, if we click on any sketch, we can toggle its visibility by clicking on it and pressing Alt V. Okay, the nice thing about this is that it's very quick and easy. Okay, but also you'll be able to do it on things like work features, like axes, points, or work planes. So you might have something like this. Okay, and very quick, you just want to get rid of that particular work plane. You just click on it and press Alt V, it goes away. So very simple. Now we'll take a look at assembly modeling enhancements. Right. First up, with the data handling, we have the bill of materials tools, which now shows zero quantity for a line item that is suppressed. So you'll find that even just now when I suppressed a component, we had this little dialog box informing us that the line item for that component in the bill of materials would show 0. There's also a bunch of other settings included in a new settings buttons up there, and the two settings are basically to resequence item numbers, right, and also BOM item status indicators, so to indicate the item status. So let's take a look. So if we have our model, we'll find that, let's say this is suppressed. If we go to our Manage tab and our Bill of Materials, we'll find that we indeed have uh, the shuttle item. It's light gray here, so it's not included, but it does say the quantity is 0 because it is being suppressed. Right, so we'll see here. So if I go to either structured or parts only and I have the item column, remember on the model data tab we don't have that, but if I go to one of these, you'll find that there's a settings here where I can go in and say renumber items sequentially or not, and I can hide the particular suppressed components in the BOM. So that shuttle, for example, will now be gone and it will not be included in the bill of materials. Other general changes to the assembly modeling environment, we have a substitute model state, so we can have also constrained options. So if you look at your constraints, you'll find that you can directly adjust these constraints. You can now suppress a constraint directly when editing it. So you'll find there's a little tick box for your constraints or your mates or whatever type of constraints you're making, and there's a little tick box to suppress it directly when you're editing it instead of having to make it first and then go and right click and suppress them. Okay, we can also rename storyboards in presentations. So you can right click on storyboard title and rename, which was never available before. You can also there's a new option to publish to video, right, where you can select the frame rate for the video. So the default used to be 15 frames per second, and now you can enter a value from 1 to 200. Okay, and lastly, there's a new checkbox to follow the pattern for bolted connections, which is driven by a sketch. That's super useful, because instead of having to click particular holes or locations, you can follow a sketch pattern to allow bolted connections to be placed. So you can place, for example, a bolt, its washer, bottom washer, and a nut at the end, following a sketch pattern that you've drawn on your own. Right. In the tube and pipe environment, you'll find that there are now presets here for auto routing. You can convert auto route to a sketch. Right, so if you need any lines on that auto route that the tube and pipe environment has made, you can convert that to a sketch. You can also have auto dimensions and auto constraints, so it would automatically constrain using certain default parameters such as parallel, perpendicular, or collinear, and etc. So that's the new features you find in the tube and pipe routing dialog box. Although this is probably a webinar on its own to discuss the entire tube and pipe environment. So maybe upcoming in the next few months we'll take a look at tube and pipe again, since the last time we did one at Micrographics. Okay, performance improvements. What has improved in Embedded 2023 performance? We now have the option for improved graphics performance of a large assemblies with many threads by turning on multi-threading and a consolidation for threads. So if there's a lot of threads that are drawn in there, performance is greatly improved. Right. We also have punch tool eye features, so we have improved sheet metal punch tool compute performance. Right. So when placed on a sketch pattern points, you'll have a lot greater performance of those punch tools. Right. Also, the visibility in express mode, so performance is greatly improved when changing component visibility while in express mode. So turning things off and on, especially using the Alt V command we just learnt about, is super fast in express mode. So please do make use of that. Lastly, we have some enhancements to documentation. Okay, so basically your drawings and your um, presentations, right? There we go. Sorry. So drawing views, the model state and overlay views. So basically, when creating an overlay view for parts, you can select a desired model state to be shown in the view. It can be useful, for example, when showing a part before the processing and after. Right? So basically, you might have different model states, and you can overlay the same part but in a different model state. That is very, very useful. So when placing an overlay view, right? Um, right. You also have edit detail properties. When editing a detail view, you can use edit detail properties to change the detail view boundary shape from circular to rectangular or whatever it is. So we now have, well, rectangular shape for detail view. So I'm sure many of you use this, or maybe do a sketch. So the command can be accessed from the view context menu in either the browser or the sheet. Right. And lastly, we have weld annotations. Right, so in the welding symbol dialog, the identification line and spacer controls are always visible, and we can now edit these things. So you'll see here, when we create a weld annotation, we have these new options, and we can edit these field direction, right, in the weld symbol style. So if you go to your styles manager, you'll find that the field flag direction can be automatic or always fixed to the left or always fixed to the right if you want to have some sort of convention standard. Okay, so edge weld symbols now uses the latest ISO standard, right? The symbol is added to the style editor and enabled by default for um, the following standards. So ISO, DIN, ANSI, BSI, GB, JIS, GOST, although that's only in Velment. Um, yeah, so that's basically the additional features for well control. So just quickly, if we can take a look at what that looks like. If I were to just create a drawing view, I'll just create. Okay, so if I would like to create some sort of overlay for this particular image, I'm just waiting for things to load. Oh, there we go. So let me, while I'm at it, project certain views. Right. So I might have a different model state. So for example, if I go to that particular model state, let's say I um, create a new model state or a new substitute, or let's just save it as, let's just suppress these. Right, and I will save this, or rather, let's create a representation. I'll say no blades, and we'll save this. Um, right, so let's just put these back on. So in my no blades view, let's activate this. We'll go and we'll say Right, so now we have two different representations. I will take this and I will copy to the model state so that I can have it there as a particular model state. Let's just save, oh, no, sorry, I should not have done that. Let's just save this so it can translate to our drawing. So let's see what that means for our drawing. Right, so if we try and use an overlay of this view, we'll find that I now have a view called no blades that is going to be overlaid on top of that, so we can see the difference. Okay, that's probably not the clearest idea, but you basically we want to overlay a particular thing with no blades on top of that design. So you'll see here that I have a blue, so this is my view 1. You'll find that I have a overlay view of no blades, and I can change the color if I wanted to of that. Okay, so the next one is the detailed views, and we find that we can create a detailed view of a particular area. Right, we can have the option to include 3D annotations or not, and we can find that we have, maybe just view that. Right, so when you're editing a detail view, you can use the edit detail properties. Right, and you can change it directly from here without having to go back to the full menu and so on. So that's basically what they mean by edit detail properties. And of course your weld submit now has these options that you can find in the Manage tab under your Styles editor. So you'll find that you can have a fixed flag direction in a particular way for when you're adding your weld symbols. Okay, and that brings us to the end of the webinar. If you guys have any questions, you're welcome to type them online and I'll try and get to them timelessly. We'll give it a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions. But up on the screen you can find our company details as well as my details. My name on the bottom, Irshad Hanif, application engineer, and my email address, or you can simply go to mgfx.co.za to find out more about any of the things you've seen on any one of our webinars. We have the following branches and contact details listed up on screen. Okay, with that being said, once again I'd like to thank you for joining us on this webinar. Hope you learned something about Inventor 2023 today, and I think it's safe to go ahead if you haven't already installed it, as a lot of the bugs have been fixed. Just a little note, something that I encountered with Inventor 2023, not fully supported with Windows 11, so probably best to keep it on Windows 10 for maximum performance and less hassle or bugs. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next video.